Well, we're talking about like how the systems that we live in, like schools and doctors, are kind of just not, it doesn't feel like they're on our side. And Beth, I was wondering, do you feel like we are poisoning our children?
The vast majority of people have no idea that we are poisoning our children, that we are destroying our health, their health. The probability of humans being able to sustain life in the future is getting smaller and smaller. I mean, look at the fertility rates are going down. That's not an accident. That's the human body being like, yeah, no, you can't carry a baby to term because it won't survive. We need to snap out of that mindset that there's a pill for every ill, that there is some kind of miracle thing. The GLP-1s are another example of that. Like, we're like, oh, a miracle to help us lose weight.
Kids, they get addicted to these foods. I mean, they're engineered to shift your brain and your biology, so your neurology, your biology, physiology, into addiction.
I do think that we can't hide forever from technology. I think when I started this journey, I was like, I was like almost leaning towards Luddite, and I was like, all iPhones and Wi-Fi and everything is bad. It's like, that's not what health is about. You're going to have the consequences if you are going for the quick fix. You have more to do than just the quick fix.
You know, being overweight isn't good for our bodies. And the fact that that definition was lost when I was 15 in school, and doctors and therapists and everyone was like, hey, it's fine to be fat. And I'm like, what do you mean?
We are so excited today to have Beth Lambert with us from North Carolina. And she's probably not from North Carolina because she doesn't have that accent. Where are you actually originally from?
I'm
Connecticut.
New Hampshire originally, actually.
And actually, before I lead in, how would you like us to introduce you? What is the best way?
Usually I'm introduced as founder and executive director of Documenting Hope.
Today, we are so honored to have Beth Lambert with us. She's the founder and director of Documenting Hope. We're going to learn all about that later in this episode, but today we're going to unpack busting some myths about common misperceptions about health. We're going to talk about how we can get our kids healthy again, how we can, as moms, get healthy again, and what it looks like for America to get healthy again and to really reignite what we have. You know, so we have an obesity epidemic, but we also have a pandemic of hopelessness. And we've forgotten somehow that our bodies can heal themselves, and they were designed to do so. We just have to learn about how and get those practical applications for everyday living. And Beth knows a thing or two about all of these topics. So welcome to the show, Beth. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So happy to be with you.
We wanted you here in person. That's true. And this is actually our first official podcast like this. So we're really excited to see that it works.
Yeah. The technology is amazing, right?
So I'd love to dive in with you about just how you started this journey. If I heard correctly, you're a mom, and you started to study some things to help your kids.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So when my oldest children were little, you know, when they were in their 2s and 3s, I started noticing some symptoms, and it was kind of the symptoms that emerged over time. Nothing like life-threatening or anything, but it was kind of like a bag of symptoms: GI issues and skin issues and behavioral issues and sensory issues. And it was kind of escalating over time. And I ended up looking, you know, at all the conventional options, going to every conventional doctor, GI doctor, allergist, psychologist, like trying to find answers for what these symptoms were really about. And I knocked on a lot of doors and got a lot of nothing answers. Like, we don't really have anything to help you. We don't know why your daughters have these issues. And then I had the great fortune of landing in the office of an integrative physician, who basically was somebody who was oriented towards root causes. And I was like, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for root causes. What is the root of why my children have these symptoms? And, you know, immediately I got put onto a path towards nutrition and detoxifying the home and just thinking differently about what might have precipitated these symptoms. And in a very short period of time, within maybe like 6 to 9 months, my children's symptoms were all gone. And this was the kind of thing where I was so blown away by my experience of having tried everything conventionally, and then had this like profound transformative kind of health experience by just focusing on the root causes and doing things that were more natural, which is kind of my inclination anyway. And seeing this transformation in not just my children's health, our whole family's health, right? Like when you change your family's diet, everybody benefits from that. And I also was at this place in my life where I was in graduate school. And I was around a lot of other young moms who were having babies. And I looked around and was just amazed at how many kids had health problems. There was all these babies in the baby play groups who all had reflux and explosive diarrhea in their diapers. And these children were getting ADHD diagnoses and autism diagnoses. And something was just really bothering me. Like, something is wrong with these kids. Aren't supposed to be like this.
Yeah.
And so that's when I actually just completely turned my focus in my graduate school program and decided I'm going to understand why there's so many sick kids today and what is happening, and also what can be done to help these kids. Because I was not only meeting families who had kids with health issues, developmental issues, but I was meeting families whose kids had overcome these kinds of things. So I had my mind blown, I think, the first time I met a parent of a child who had autism. And then this parent helped their child reverse their autism diagnosis, so they no longer had any symptoms anymore. And when I met that first parent, and then I eventually met another and another and another, when I met these parents who would reverse these conditions in their kids, I was like, wait a minute. You are telling me that these conditions are out there and these parents are being told that this is lifelong, that it's genetic, that there's nothing you can do. But yet then there's all these kids who are doing this kind of on the margins and periphery of society, and they're getting better. And that's not our standard of care. What is wrong with us?
I know, Beth, I totally can relate. Penelope also was diagnosed with ADHD early on, and all of her friends were in a similar boat because she went to specialized schools for ADHD. And she said to me, Mom, where do the kids go? Because her friends basically left at midday, and she wasn't talking about physically gone. They took their medication. And
It was so weird. It was like a psych ward. Like it was like out of a movie where they would come with like a little like plastic cup and give everyone their dose. And I was like the only one. When I was little, I felt left out. But now I know what was really going on. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's why all these kids were kids. And then they became like zombies.
And I, like you, was on a quest to not give Penelope that medication. And a lot of the kids she went to school with were also autistic, not in the second school, but the first. And some of them did completely reverse the autism. These were nonverbal kids. These were kids that were really dysfunctional. And it is amazing when you see that, right? When we see, I've had people in my life who reversed their cancer naturally, their diabetes naturally. That's an easier one. But it is totally mind blowing. And you wonder why it isn't the standard of care. And I think that's why we're doing what we do today, to reinstill hope that it is possible. And that's probably why you named your foundation that.
Yeah, documenting hope. That's what we're doing, because nobody was documenting the hope of reversal, the hope of prevention, or what hope there was for these kids in their future. They were just telling them, oh, here's your medication, here's your path forward. You'll always need this medication. And that's an absolutely unacceptable answer when we know that that's not the reality. There's plenty of options out there. There's plenty we can do. It's just that people aren't being given that information, and that's solvable.
Yeah, so not being given that information, and some say, oh, well, it's only for the privileged few who can afford it. And, there's all these arguments, and it's really a tricky topic. In fact, the schools were really pressing me to give Penelope medication for the ADHD diagnosis and for other things. And I said, no, I just wouldn't do it. But I feel like their hands are tied. It's like the best they can do is offer a procedure, a surgery, or a medicine, because the medical model doesn't really support anything other than that. There is no education or accountability built into a hospital, a pediatrician's office, medical doctor's office, school, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I don't know. Do you see that same problem?
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you think about what's the pathway of least resistance, what's the easiest thing to do is oftentimes to medicate, because especially if you have these prescription medications that have come off patent, you're talking about a very inexpensive and very effective. For the ADHD medications can be very effective at helping somebody focus, at helping them, really sit still in the classroom, or whatever it is needed to get through the day. They can be very effective. So of course, somebody's going to pull that off the shelf. Of course, they're going to put that as the first solution. But they're not taking into consideration the long-term consequences of those ADHD medications, or whatever the medication might be that's just, suppressing the symptoms, putting a Band-Aid on it. And like you said, our medical system is not oriented towards root causes. Now, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, these practices that have been around for thousands of years, they are oriented towards root causes and looking to help transform health. That's not the Western medical model. It's changing. I feel like there's a lot of functional medicine doctors that are kind of shifting into that. And there's new trainings that are offered to conventionally trained physicians to think that way. But the vast majority are not trained that way. They're not trained to think that way. And it's going to take a major sort of groundswell of people leaving those practices and going to the other kinds of practices in order to shift the system, I think.
I agree. Bottom up, top down. And then there's that transformation. Beth, I'm so aligned with you and have led a similar path. And then all of a sudden, I lost control over Penelope's environment
Mm-hmm.
because she just kept going to the neighbors' houses, the play dates, the after school events, wanting to eat at school, throwing away the school lunch. And we were just in Arizona and we helped to get this bill passed for getting ultra processed foods out of school. And it's a small step, hopefully will lead to bigger realizations like, oh, why is ultra processed food maybe dangerous and harmful? And it was really hard. It was really challenging. And as a parent, it's like I enabled it because of course she's living in my house. And at the same time, there's a certain point when your kids are not interested in your help and they're not willing to take it. Did you experience anything like that with your own kids, even knowing as much as you do?
Of course, that's a daily battle, I think, for any parent who's living in modern America, because the culture that we live in is toxic, and the food is toxic, the products are toxic, the lifestyle, the things that we do every day are toxic to our bodies, and yet, the people that end up thriving, the children and adults who end up thriving, are the ones who live counterculture. Right? They're the ones who decide that, all right, I'm not going to eat the processed foods. I'm not going to spend, 10 hours on my iPad every day. It actually takes, I think, a social grouping. It takes several people, friends and family members banding together and just sort of normalizing that behavior. I do feel like we're in a shift right now where, people are kind of making fun of it and talking about like RFK going to come in and police how people are eating and things like that. Like we're all poking fun at it, but it is a moment that we're in where people are actually paying attention to foods and their impact on health. And people are actually looking around and be like, oh yeah, we do have an obesity epidemic. We have half of, people in this country who are overweight or obese. And I think people are starting to look for answers and trying to see how they might shift things in their own lives to help impact their health. So it does feel like we live in this, we're swimming in this culture that is just making us all sick. But people are starting to slowly wake up to the fact that they need to do something different. And sometimes it comes through diagnosis, right? The cancer diagnosis or the type 2 diabetes diagnosis or whatever it is. And that's a quick way to wake up, right? That snaps people out. But a lot of us go through and manage the symptoms. It's like that burning, smoldering fire, and it just sort of burns slowly until it really ignites. And then we all have to wake up. I hope to raise awareness faster than that. So then we have to wait till everybody has a diagnosis. But we're getting there.
We are getting there. And I'm curious why you named it Documenting Hope. You could have said anything, right? But there's something about the word documenting that I think is important for you.
Yeah, that name has a lot of meanings for us. One meaning is that we have been for over 15 years documenting the stories of children who have fully reversed their conditions. And I'm talking about things, again, that everyone thinks are genetic, like you have rheumatoid arthritis or MS or something like that. And people are like, oh, terrible genes that you have, like as if that's the answer. But then you meet people who fully reverse these things. And then it starts breaking that whole paradigm, that whole gene-based paradigm. So we're documenting the stories of these families who have reversed these conditions, but we're also doing research. So we have an independent research platform that we started in 2018 with a couple IRB approved studies trying to both understand what it is in our environment and how we're living that's making our children sick, but also what is the path back to wellness, and like how do we help document these cases of kids who have gotten better and put that in the medical literature. Last summer, we published our first peer-reviewed paper in the Journal of Personalized Medicine, and it was a case report of a set of twin girls who had lost their autism diagnoses. And we documented everything that those kids did, what therapists they saw, what kinds of food they were eating. They measured everything that you can measure in terms of, ATAC, which is a score that's used to see how severely you are affected by autism. And these girls just made a quick turnaround in a little over a year. And that kind of publications and peer-reviewed literature feel really important to me, because a lot of times these parents will go into their pediatrician's practice or developmental pediatrician's office and say, I've heard that you can reverse autism. I heard this but it's like out on the social media, for instance. And then usually the physician will say, well, there's no evidence of that. Don't have false hope because somebody told you a diet would change your child's autism. But once it gets in the medical literature, these doctors have to stand up and they have to pay attention, because you can't deny it. So it's one of our initiatives is to publish more case reports about kids that are overcoming these conditions, but also to do more research to document it longitudinally. So we do have a longitudinal study where we're taking a small group of children and documenting what happens when they change their diet, when their parents wake up to the environmental factors in the home that might be contributing, when they learn about different kinds of personalized therapies that can help their children overcome their diagnoses. So the documenting piece is critically important because I feel like we're still in that place where people don't believe it's true. And
I
the
agree.
reason they don't believe is because their doctors are telling them it's not true.
They just don't know any better. I mean, they really don't. They just don't know any better, and they're liable, right? So, yeah. But now they're going to know better because of your work, which is really important. And there's going to be hopefully a ton of funding from the NIH for such programs. So hopefully you can study all the things you've been burning to study, because I know that the gut microbiome is so key, and we need a ton of research on that and antibiotic use. We need a ton of research on what's happening with 5G and to phones in general, and how much time actually is allocated. And I think in our generation of moms, we were kind of blindsided. We had no idea what these phones were going to do to our kids. And now we're starting to realize the implications and without natural light. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, my mom was just like, get out, don't come in until it's dark, And so we had a lot, it was just natural to have sunshine. And for you guys, we have to like pull you out of bed and off the screen.
It's true.
Tricky. The brain damage that is being caused by the chemicals, by the phones, and so on and so forth.
Well, we're talking about like how the systems that we live in, like schools and doctors, are kind of just not, it doesn't feel like they're on our side. And Beth, I was wondering, do you feel like we are poisoning our children, like as a country?
It sounds so harsh that, when you say, are we poisoning our children? But the short answer is yes. Yes, we are. Are we doing it with an awareness that we're doing it? Usually no. Sometimes, I think there are large corporations that know that they're polluting, the air, the water, the soil, and they sort of cover it up, and there's a profit incentive. So there's that element of it. But I would say the vast majority of people have no idea that we are poisoning our children, that we are destroying our health, their health. The probability of humans being able to sustain life in the future is getting smaller and smaller. I mean, look at the fertility rates are going down. That's not an accident. That's the human body being like, yeah, no, you can't carry a baby to term because it won't survive. So I think that we are just in a place where it's an emergent phenomenon. That means that since World War II, for instance, the United States industrialized like crazy, and we developed all these petrochemical pharmaceuticals and these petrochemical solvents and these petrochemical based, colorings, flavorings, like anything that is sort of a normal part of what you see when you walk through a Target or a Walmart, like all the synthetic and plastic and chemical things, those have not been around that long. I mean, really, like in the grand scheme of human history, this is just a blink of an eye that we've had all these synthetic products in and around in our lives. And no one's really studied the cumulative and synergistic effect of being exposed to that stuff every day, all day. They've looked at individual things. So there's lots of medical literature about bisphenol A and how that's an endocrine disrupting plasticizer chemical that's in a lot of products. Or they've looked at the harm of arsenic exposure, or if they looked at the harm of, paints and solvents individually. But no one's looked at the stuff cumulatively and synergistically. Everyone thinks that's like, dose makes the poison, right? Like, so if you have a lot of exposure to BPA, you're going to be in trouble, but a little's probably fine. And actually, that's not true. We are now beginning to understand that even a little bit of this poison plus a little bit of that poison, and if you look at the number of poisons that we're exposed to on the daily, your body is overloaded. Our detoxification capabilities can't keep up. So I do think we have this situation where we're swimming in a toxic soup, have no idea. And it's almost so overwhelming to even conceive of that that people get paralyzed, right? It's the analysis paralysis. It's like, if I don't want to think about it because everything's toxic, right? If you start
Yeah.
really looking at it.
Yeah, and I just want to validate what you're saying, because when I worked at a health institute, I was a director of a health institute where we were reversing diabetes, cancer, and heart disease naturally, as well as other autoimmune issues. And for their online program that I put together, we interviewed a Dr. Williams. He was at the time at the University of Oregon at the Linus Pauling Institute, and his area of expertise was toxology. Even though he was in charge of the, Linus Pauling Institute educating on food as medicine, and he was getting funding from the NIH to do chemo prevention through phytonutrient therapy. And he had a lot of insight into the topic that you just described, because yes, there may be over 70,000 chemicals in the environment that weren't there 100 years ago. And only a fraction of them have we looked at and studied. And many of those are endocrine disruptors and or, causing cancer, carcinogenic. And one of the things that he illustrated for us, I can send you the graphic, was at some point in the DNA matrix that we're actually interrupting the DNA, which he said was irreversible. I don't know if I believe that, because I saw so many cancer reversals. So I don't know that I believe that, but he said the cancer is caused, when the DNA is mutated so irreparably, due to this toxic soup that you're describing. And I don't want our listeners to feel hopeless, because we are, documenting hope here. So there are ways. And I think the illustration of the gravity is very important, because a lot of people have no idea, and they're like, chronic fatigue, boom. And they're like, I just don't have any energy. That's one of the main things I hear. And it's like, why? Because your body gets, older we get, it gets worse and worse. And even babies are being born toxic. So how do we, or what would you recommend for, optimizing detoxification pathways and helping people to help themselves to be on top of detoxifying every day?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand this concept of total load, which is just a framework for understanding what it means to be exposed to many, many toxic things in our lives and what we need to do to overcome that and stay healthy. So it's kind of this idea that, your body is a barrel, let's say, and each toxic exposure or stressor could, like EMF can, for instance, doesn't have to be like a chemical toxin, but every health stressor is like one drop of water going into that barrel. At some point that barrel fills up and you don't have capacity anymore. That's when you're going to see symptoms. That barrel's like basically overflowing. So there's a couple ways of thinking about dealing with that. One, you can stop the number of drops of water going into the barrel, so you can reduce your toxic exposures, get as close to nature as possible in all things, in the food, just don't use a lot of the personal care products that people think they have to use, laundry detergents and cleaning products and all the things that we have in modern life. Like, just lean into natural. There's usually natural versions of pretty much everything people use for consumer products right now. That's going to reduce the number of drops going into that barrel. But you can also increase the size and shape of your barrel. So you have this resiliency that you have access to through doing things that support your health, like sleeping 8 or more hours a night, living in rhythm with sort of natural circadian rhythms. So like getting up with the sun and going to bed, or sort of winding down and turning down the lights when the sun goes down. I mean, our ancestors for time immemorial lived in rhythm with the sun. And now we're like, yeah, I'm going to stay up till 1 a.m. and then get up and at 6 a.m. and go. Like, this is just nonsense, right? So living in rhythm with nature increases your capacity to handle more toxic and health stressors. Having hydration with clean water, and doing what you can to just have more balance in your life, have your nervous system regulated. Like, people talk about breathing and meditation, and I think a lot of people dismiss that, like, I'm meditating and I still have Hashimoto's, or I'm trying to do these breathing exercises, but I still have my cancer diagnosis or whatever. But like, they have to take the whole 360-degree view here, right? It isn't just enough to meditate. It isn't just enough to get a good night's sleep. You want to attack this from both angles. Do everything you can to support your health, the exercise, the sleep, the outside time, while simultaneously removing as many of the stressors as you can. And the stressors, again, can be chemicals, they can be foods, they can be people, they can be emotional stressors. It's that balance, right, between how much good stuff is going in versus how much bad stuff is going in.
And just side note to the audience, everything Beth just outlined are also going to help you to lose weight.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
Believe it or not, right? So in case you didn't know, Beth, you probably know this, but the audience might not, but your fat cells hold
Mhm.
toxins. In
Right.
fact, the largest concentration of toxins can be in your fat cells. In fact, it's a 30-day cycle. It's a different type of release for the fat cells in particular. So losing weight is a fantastic way to help your body to detoxify.
Yeah, and your body's just trying to protect itself. Even the cancer tumors, that is your body trying to protect itself from some kind of, toxic or dangerous exposure. So we have to stop thinking of this as like a battle we're fighting, and it's more like, what is my body trying to tell me? And if I'm gaining weight and holding on to weight, what is my body protecting me against? What is my body trying to do on my behalf? And I think that, that there's a million different ways to improve your detoxification, whether it's eating foods that are supportive of like the liver detoxification pathway, like the cruciferous vegetables, like the Brussels sprouts and cauliflower and broccoli and things like that. There are ways to get more magnesium into your body, like Epsom salts baths that are super easy for kids. Like detoxification doesn't have to be hard. It just has to be these ways of supporting your body and giving your body what it needs to naturally detoxify. There's more sophisticated ways, of course, that people can detoxify. I mean, there's different kinds of herbs you can take, or there's methods like homotoxicology, which is a gentle way of detoxifying using homeopathy. So you can get really deep into it. But you can also, again, just try to support your body's natural processes, because your body wants to detoxify. It is oriented towards that.
Right, it's doing it all day, every day, and we just have to learn how to partner with it to optimize it.
Right.
Yeah. So speaking of parents, like what's the number one thing you feel parents are doing that's destroying their kids' health every day that they might not even know they're doing?
Well, there's so many. Well, I think, a lot of people would automatically go to food, because food is, we weren't raised knowing what is good health supporting food. I mean, a lot of the Gen X parents and millennials sort of grew up at a time where processed food was the norm. So I just feel like that's one major piece that most parents can have more control over, but they also know. I think most people are beginning to know that the food is a major piece. But I would say, to your question about something they're not even aware of, is that living in the modern world creates a really fragmented, chaotic feeling in your nervous system. I think people's nervous systems are just on high alert constantly in the modern world. And if you think about why, it's like we're surrounded by so much stimulus, and there are pressures, whether you're in school, like you're a high school student, or whether you're an adult out in the world working, that the expectations and the pressure on you make for a very stressed out human being. And think about the pace of life, rushing here, getting to this practice, going here, trying to not be late for work. Like there is such a level of stress that exists now that didn't exist generations ago. And if you think about, we came from sort of agricultural ancestral roots, like it's not normal for our bodies to be exposed to that kind of stress. So I feel like we as parents, if we can regulate our nervous systems, just calm things down a little bit, that actually brings our children into a calmer state. And when our nervous systems are in a sort of parasympathetic or rest and digest kind of state, your body has more capacity to heal. Your body can't heal or overcome whatever challenges it has if you're in a sympathetic state. And that's when you're revved up, when you're stressed, when you're go, go, go. I think that is actually one of the under-recognized causes of this new childhood epidemic, is that our society and our pace and the expectations for what we're supposed to do every day are just totally incompatible with human biology and physiology. It's like we're all being chased by, predators all day long, when actually it's just, oh no, we're trying to get to school on time, or we're trying to get to work on time. Oh, I missed the bus. Like that's an unnecessary stressor or set of stressors that we have, that we could eliminate by making some different choices in our life and how we live. I think that's why a lot of people go to homeschooling and homesteading, because they recognize that the modern way of living is just not constructive. It's not conducive to health.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It is a big problem, and we hear from most women that come to us, I'm stressed, I'm
Mhm.
overwhelmed, I can't get organized, my kids don't like real food,
Mhm.
and they're literally feeling like they're underwater all the
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
And I'd love to just discuss, from mom to mom, and And then maybe also even your kids may have strategies that they use, but like, what's one thing that the audience listening could do to stress less? I have a few ideas in my head, but I mean, I know you mentioned a bunch of things about, and regulating the nervous system previously, but maybe something a little bit different that, like a mom, I remember what that was like, rushing to the bus and, shoes and, all the things. It's like, you're in the midst of it. You don't even realize
Mhm.
what's happening. You're just
Mhm.
so slammed all the time. What can they do? Like in the moment, right? Three kids trying to get out the door for, to get to school on time.
Yeah. I think that what's necessary is the ability to kind of just pull back from whatever it is you're doing every day, and looking at it and thinking, all right, how necessary is this? I remember when my kids were little, I think I had two of them in Taekwondo. The other one was doing like mini soccer in this kind of schedule that was insane, where I had to like literally pick one kid up, race across town, and I was like stressed because I didn't want the coaches to be mad. Like I'd created this myself. Why did I have to have my kids in these activities and zipping around and feeling stress around, showing up late or what have you? Like, you have to be able to zoom back from that and be like, yeah, no, I don't, my kids do not need to be in these activities. Or, I need to maybe think about what I'm doing in my life for a job, for instance, that is, not supporting my family's health and development. And we have plenty of jobs that maybe we're used to the grind. I mean, I lived in New York City for a number of years, and that place grinds. I mean, people don't have a work-life balance. They're just used up by the system, and you have to at some point be like, what am I doing this for? There are other jobs. There are other careers out there. There are other pathways. So sometimes it's just a matter of zooming out and saying, what is essential here? What do I really need? What's important? That's very hard to do when you have bills to pay and you have, pressures and expectations. Maybe your family or your community expects something out of you, but what is more important than your health? And if that daily schedule and those expectations coming from society are damaging your health, is that worth it? Really? So I think that's what we need to all do, is just gain that perspective.
Solid advice. Solid advice. Maybe difficult, but also the most important thing you can do, because and I'm sure you know many women who are just burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
And the cost, to all of this, not taking action today and doing the more difficult thing, even though it's the right thing, is high.
Right. And also, you can listen to the experience of people who've been before us who have had these health crises. Most people wake up and start changing the pace of their life and like maybe quit that job and like stop the intensity of whatever the schedule is after they get sick.
It's true.
So it's like the cancer diagnosis, and they're like, oh, okay, I can't do this anymore because my body won't allow it. So you have the opportunity before you get sick to just listen to those people who've hit that wall ahead of you, and just, they're going to warn you. They're going to be like, you don't need to push yourself that way. You need to listen to the cues of your body and do it before something really serious happens, like, like a cancer diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would say, what's one very unpopular opinion that might get you canceled for having?
That's a good question. An unpopular opinion that might get me canceled. That I just think that conventional medical doctors don't have the answers. That's an unpopular opinion. Most people, I mean, my best friends from college are conventionally trained medical doctors, and they are brilliant and they have such great skills and tools, but they don't necessarily have what it takes for chronic illnesses and reversing chronic illnesses. That was not trained. They were not trained for that in medical school. Conventional medicine is great for acute care, emergencies, surgeries, like that, amazing, profound things that can happen through conventional medicine. But I think that we are reliant on conventional medicine for keeping ourselves healthy and for preventing chronic illness, but they weren't really trained to do that. That's not what was part of their medical school. Their medical school training was so reliant on pharmacology, and also the system is set up to really, screw doctors over. Where like you have a patient who comes in and is like, I have these headaches and I have this GI pain and help me, and the doctor has 5 minutes and all I've got is a script, because they can't educate their patient about diet or stress or anything like that. And a lot of times when they do, the patient doesn't want to hear it. So I feel like that's kind of, we're in a tough position in terms of what our expectations are from the medical community. But there are so many better choices out there than sort of the conventionally trained medical doctors and naturopaths. A lot of the osteopaths have been trained more holistically. Even functional nutritionists or dietitians have better answers for people who have chronic illness or who want to prevent some kind of chronic illness. And I think that's an unpopular opinion because people love their doctors, you know?
Yeah, I have the same opinion. I mean, and I in fact did get canceled for it.
What do you think about Ozempic then? Because they're giving it to children over the age of 12.
Such a great question. I have such mixed feelings about it because, of course, like you guys, you probably keep your ear to the rail when these new like miracle drugs come out. Like, well, what's your first thought is like, well, that's great that it's helping people. What else is it doing? And then you start cataloging the side effects of people who have gastroparesis, and it like messes up their, GI tract, and they have all these sort of mental health issues that come from it. What I've learned about the GLP-1s, I mean, it's just a peptide, and peptides are kind of this brand new class of therapeutics that people are putting a lot of hope into, expecting them to be sort of miracles. But I think specifically with the Ozempics and the GLP-1s, I think there's a dosing problem. I think that people are not dosing that appropriately, and that's where you get a lot of the side effects. I also just worry about relying on a magic bullet when you haven't made the modifications to your lifestyle that are going to support your health in a sustainable way. So again, anything that's a magic bullet, even if it's like a natural peptide, and you're not making the changes that you need to with your diet and your stress and all that kind of stuff, it's going to catch up to you. Maybe you lose weight now, but there's going to be longer term consequences. So I do feel very skeptical about health practices, health therapeutics that don't also change the way you're living, that don't have you rethink what you're eating, what you're thinking, what you're doing every day.
I totally agree with you. I read recently that they had outlawed compounding pharmacies to make lower doses of GLP-1 agonists, which is interesting, just as a marker. And I also spoke to a medical doctor friend of mine, and she's on one of these medications. And she said to me, well, what's interesting, because I don't do well on the higher doses. I actually need a lower dose, and it's hard for me to modify the dose because it comes in, pre-dosed.
Mm-hmm.
That this was what was so fascinating. She said, if I'm not at the maximum dose by month 3, they will not pay for it.
Wow.
And I was blown away. And so it's interesting to hear your reflection on that because it's concerning. We had a gut microbiome specialist here last month or the month before, a few months ago.
Dr. Hassan.
Yeah, and she was very concerned, and she's now. So if anyone listening is on a GLP-1 agonist and they want to be part of her study, she's now studying it, so we can actually get some answers about what's happening with the gut microbiome because it is very concerning. And I know you've done some research around the gut microbiome, and anything that I've learned about it is you disrupt that gut microbiome, and you have a cascade of complications, and it takes a long time to recover it. I myself was on intravenous antibiotics for an entire year because I had osteomyelitis, and then I was on antibiotics my entire childhood from chronic ear infections, and I've spent my entire adult life rebuilding my gut microbiome because from all the issues I had. And it is directly linked to autism. I think it's directly linked to a lot of these behavioral issues, and we're just not aware. And even you, like, even though you didn't take antibiotics except for like once, I think, or twice. Anyway, even you with processed food alone, it caused major issues. And so I mean, and the toxic, load, we'd have no idea, like you said, about the symbiotic relationship and the impact on the gut microbiome. But one thing's for sure, the gut-brain axis is real. There's thousands of studies now to back that up. These mental issues, we're having a mental health crisis in America. And I think we're seeing that SSRIs, antidepressants, don't work. That a lot of these anxiety medications and other drugs they don't work, and they're frankly dangerous long term, and there's no titration off of it. Nor is there a titration plan off of Ozempic. So, this is a really big issue that we're facing, especially when it comes to children, because we don't even know how it affects fertility. And we're giving it to young girls and boys. But it's very challenging. I, like you, agree. The lifestyle changes, like, wouldn't it be great if there was a world where the health insurance company made you tick a few boxes? made you somehow prove, and we have the wearable markers, we have the data that we could integrate, make you prove that you're making these lifestyle changes before you're eligible for coverage. Like that
Right.
would be an intelligent move on the health insurance company, health insurance. Yeah.
Right, but the system's captured by the pharmaceutical industry, and the system's set up to benefit the pharmaceutical industry, just like you described with the GLP-1s, like the fact that they're required to have a certain amount of a certain dosage. Like it just is set up as a profit making healthcare system. It's not about taking care of people's health or preventing. It's just about making profit. I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for a couple of years when I was in my 20s as like a strategy consultant. And some of the things that I saw happen were just complete lack of ethics. Why? Because a profit motive came first. And at first I remember being like sort of a doe-eyed 20 something being like, I can't believe this is happening in the pharmaceutical industry. Everybody needs to know about this like lack of ethics. But then I was like, it's a business. It's a business like any other business. Like, of course they're going to have a profit motive. What we need to do is separate this idea that healthcare is, and the healthcare companies are out to help us. They're not, they're businesses. So like, we just need to understand that. So we also need to take responsibility for our health. We do so much outsourcing of our health, and we've been trained. It's interesting what you talk about with the microbiome and the antibiotics, because I think the microbiome is like the seat of our health. And it's such a core area for us both to experience the damage, but also do the repair work. But if you go back to like the post-World War II era, we had these antibiotics that came out for the first time. And what did these little pills do? They cured tuberculosis. Like, you had a dude who was going to die there, from an infection or from a lung infection or what have you. And you got this miracle pill that came and saved him. So everyone was like, oh, wow. I mean, just imagine how much that captured the Western mind. People were just, in awe of these miracle drugs. And so we started just keeping that pipeline going after the antibiotics. Well, what came next? Oh, you have the steroid medications that bring that inflammation down and have that instant kind of gratification that people love with their symptoms going away. But what happened is that pipeline kept going. And then what we did is we developed patent medicine, which is patent medicine. In order for something to be patented, it has to be not like anything in nature. It has to be manipulated so that the molecule does not replicate anything in nature. So what are you doing? You're putting a molecule in your body that your body isn't going to recognize because it's been manipulated in the lab. And your body's going to automatically have a problem with it, have a problem with, processing it. So if you think about since World War II, we have built this entire medical system based on patent medicines, on putting molecules in our body that our body won't recognize. And we're expecting it to do the job for us because of that initial miracle with those antibiotics. Think about that. We need to snap out of that mindset that there's a pill for every ill, that there is some kind of miracle thing. The GLP-1s are another example of that. Like, we're like, oh, a miracle to help us lose weight. It's like, that's not what health is about. You're going to have the consequences if you are going for the quick fix. You have more to do than just the quick fix.
Yeah, and they're like stepping over the reason why the weight came on in the first place. And it's usually because, we weren't taught how to deal with our emotions. People are usually, the people that we know that are in our group, I mean, they're so loving and caring. And it's like they're wearing their heart on their sleeve, and they've just been stuffing their emotions because they didn't know any other way. And then whoops, all of a sudden they're addicted. And I think that's really what I see and saw with Penelope, and I see with a lot of women. It's just like they just and kids, they get addicted to these foods. I mean, they're engineered to shift your brain and your biology, so your neurology, your biology, physiology, into addiction. And that's proven by science. It's not a new thing. And I don't want anyone to be a victim of that.
Right.
And I think that people are just wanting to negotiate. I mean, I find that especially new members of our group, they just want to negotiate. Well, like, how much ice cream can I have? Well, like, how many, Pringles can I have? And it's like, for me, it's like all or nothing. And I'm curious what your reflection is on that as well. Like, you clean up your house. Like, well, I can do the cleaning products, but I have to scrub harder. Or, it's just, I need bleach, because it's just not making my whites white enough. And it's just like, well, where can I get away? What can I negotiate with? And so I'm curious with you, with these health turnarounds, was there a degree of negotiation that you found was workable?
The short answer is no. I don't think there's a degree of negotiation that's workable. I mean, there are swaps that you can do that are kind of like negotiation. So like, if you're eating a lot of bread, you might be able to make some kind of more paleo oriented, lower carb kind of, like, I get that kind of thing. That helps people get through that initial change. But I think most people who've had these transformations in their health have gone all in, cold turkey, and just made significant changes. I do think, though, that when you give people a window and you're like, just do it for 3 weeks, let's just do this for 3 weeks, and then you can go back to normal, because everyone wants to know, when can I go back to normal? Right? Because that's what's comfortable. That's what feels good. Like, that's what I love my normal, I love my ice cream at night, or I love my, my breads and cakes and cookies, or whatever it is. But if you say, all right, you have to go 3 weeks or 4 weeks, or give a window that you're just going to go cold turkey, and then they think they're going to go back to normal at that point. But that's enough time usually to cut the addiction, to switch off different kinds of chemicals that are creating that addiction. And then you regroup. I feel like health coaching is profoundly important, because I think the health coaches are there to help you get through that and move through that. It doesn't have to be health coaches. You can do it with friends. I mean, I know lots of people who've gone on these health journeys together. The hardest part is doing it alone. So if you have a sister or a brother or a friend or somebody that you can be like, all right, we're going to do this together for a month. We're going to go to the gym together for a month, or whatever it is, it's way easier. But that is also why I like health coaches, because they're to cheer you on when you've gone the 3 weeks and you're like, you're wanting to go back to normal. And then the health coach is like, actually, what if you just stayed like this?
Right. I mean, that's what we do in our group. Our accountability group is exactly what you just described, because we agree with you that we're not meant to do it alone. And in fact, it's really challenging to do it alone. And it's so interesting, because we had a member who had chronic pain. She wanted to lose weight, but actually she was just in so much pain every night, every day, all day, every day. And she's just like, this is not okay. I'm only 40. And so she decided to give up processed food
for the first time in her entire life.
Yep. And on day 4, she was free of the pain. And I use that to illustrate, only I think the reason why people don't go back to what they knew as normal is because they realize that the new normal is so much better. They have more energy, and they never forget the way that new normal feels, because they have more vitality. They wake up in the morning, they don't smell the same way, they don't feel the same way. And I think that speaks volumes, is that window. And it's so funny you talk about normal. I mean, like, what is normal? It's like our normal today is just it's just interesting. I'm just laughing at it out loud.
Yeah.
How valuable that is to
and sometimes people will go through a 2 or 3 week period of a change, like taking gluten out or dairy out or whatever it is that the changes are, and they'll feel better, like you described. And then they'll go back and they'll try the dairy again, or try the gluten again, or whatever it is. And then they'll be like, oh, this is awful.
It doesn't taste good.
So much worse on the food. Like, sometimes when your body clears something out and then you go back on it and you have reactivity to it, your symptoms are 10 times worse. Yes. So it can be a good experience for the longevity and sustainability of these changes, to go back onto something after you've been off of it, just to remind yourself.
It's true. We had a member start in June, and in October she had some Halloween candy, and she's like, this was disgusting. It tasted so bad. So that was really exciting to see her do that. So what are some tenets for our audience? I mean, for us, it's really try to get as much whole foods into your life, but everything as much whole foods as possible. That's one of the tenets. And then we suggest that you get rid of, flour and sugar inside of that. But I'm curious what you would say if someone listening said, okay, I want to make some changes in my diet. What would be the things that you would say, the all or nothing for dietary?
I think doing what you can to rebuild your microbiome is incredibly important. So, like, when I started my family's health journey, I learned how to ferment vegetables. I learned how to make my own sauerkraut. I made my own water kefir. I just basically started fermenting things. And I actually thought it was fun. It's kind of like,
we do it too.
like a new activity, but it's super important, as you know, for your microbiome. And then just eating more fiber to help support your microbiome. And with kids, it's really hard, right? Like, I'm sure there's people that are like, I'm never going to get my kids to eat sauerkraut. But I started telling my kids, like, you have to feed yourself, but you have to feed the little pets in your gut too. And sort of giving them sort of that conception that there was 2 people to feed, you and the organ in your GI tract.
I love that.
Yeah.
And there are olives that are naturally fermented that I don't know if you know about the Good Faith Farms.
I don't think I do. No.
Yeah, they're so good. I should apologize in advance because they're so good and they're not inexpensive. But that's a fun one. And so I also think I want to tell our listeners right now, it's expensive to buy these foods. but worthwhile in the beginning, especially if you don't but you don't need fancy equipment to ferment your own vegetables, right? You can
No.
It's something that cultures have been doing for thousands of years, every culture throughout time, in fact, Europeans, Russians, Asians, and it's
Mhm.
been a staple of nourishing traditions throughout time. So it's just really something you can just get a jar. You can use an old pickle jar. It doesn't have to be complicated. And, I'm sure we can give resources on how to walk you through it. But, you just basically put the vegetables in, let it ferment for a few days. And I'm oversimplifying it, but I mean, you just need the bacteria, right?
Yeah, no, it's just salt, water, and vegetables, basically. And to your very good point, it helps to remember that human beings have been doing this for thousands of years and have been living sort of in a way where they only ate whole foods that had been preserved in a certain way or prepared in a certain way. It's like grains, for instance, have always been prepared and preserved in a certain way. And we do such a different method of harvesting, preparing our grains now that our bodies just don't want that. They want the way that they've been prepared and acclimated to over thousands of years. So I always tell people to kind of think like, can you eat the way your great grandmother did? Can you go sort of think ancestrally? Like, would your ancestors have eaten this mango in the middle of January in northern New Hampshire? Nope, they wouldn't have, So try and think about what is sort of ancestrally aligned. And would your ancestors have done this? Would they have eaten this? Because that's how the body evolved and adapted over millennia. And it's like taking these human bodies and putting them through this absolute shock because the way we live now is so different from our ancestors.
Mm. So you're a strategist, I heard. You just mentioned it. And I'm curious how you think that our American youth are going to be healthy again. Like if you had to wave a wand and just, and tell Kennedy or the powers that be, what would you lay out for them as the plan?
So a couple things. One, I do think that we can't hide forever from technology. I think when I started this journey, I was like, I was like almost leaning towards Luddite, and I was like, I like all iPhones and Wi-Fi and everything is bad, which the exposures are bad, but technology is here. So that's a problem. I think like somebody like me who's Gen X trying to tell, the Gen Zs and youngers coming up that they can't do tech, like that's not going to fly. So we have to figure out a balance between these kinds of exposures that are part of what it means to be human right now. And that balance is like turning it off at night and turning your Wi-Fi off and finding ways to kind of mitigate that harm. I also feel like we're going to have changes when we have young people like you, Penelope, who are leading the charge, people who are influencers, who are like owning it and being like, yeah, I want to be healthy. Yeah, I want to have babies. Like, what's wrong with you guys? Like eating processed foods? Like, what I mean? By just owning it and feeling like it is the new normal to want to eat that way and to want to live that way and protect your peace whenever you can. Like that is how this whole thing will shift. I feel like it's too late for my generation. And I feel like I'm trying, hard to educate people, but it is absolutely the young people, the sort of millennials and below who are going to change the minds. And I do think that enough people are sick right now and not feeling well, that's going to make an impact too, that people are going to want to do what they can to feel their best.
So there's that like societal thing with technology, but also the children are not exercising, they're not eating right. I mean, and a lot of this is parents, but the family unit is kind of broken down with the divorce rate and whatnot. So, and parents working all the time. So, what do you see, in terms of that level, like lifestyle outside of technology and the parental influence?
Well, I think that, like I said, the young people are making different choices consciously, and maybe choosing like I don't want to have that that grind job where I have to be, going from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I walk into my farmer's market. I love this about my farmer's market, and I look around at all the different stalls where they're coming in from all over the different farms in North Carolina. More often than not, they're young families. And that is so exciting to me because I feel like these are people who have made the conscious choice to do this as a lifestyle. They're actually homesteading, they're farming, and they're doing it and they're making it happen. They're using technology, to reach buyers and distribution pathways that maybe their grandparents didn't have if they had a farm. So I feel like the younger generation are making different choices. and choosing to do things differently. They're opting out for the culture that isn't working for them and their families.
Right. So that looks like probably like not even home ownership in the same way. Maybe not even not like, because I heard the other day that average age of a farmer is 52. So we really need young people to consider farming. It's a really big deal.
Yeah, and even just homesteading. I feel like that's something that, vegetable gardening, grabbing a few pots and learning how to grow tomatoes on a windowsill. Like people are starting to do these things,
All right, Penelope, we got to do our spring garden and get
Okay,
chickens.
let's do it.
Are you in? Like, no, we've been
I'm in on the garden 100%.
You are?
I'm in on the garden 100%.
Okay, chickens not yet.
Well, chickens, I don't feel like we're home enough for chickens. You know,
yeah.
we have to. Homesteading means being home.
Yeah, you're right. Right now, we're out there speaking talking the talk, walking the walk.
But that brings up a great point, because our children, like, I really think about this a lot as a young Gen Zer, I guess. I feel weird calling myself that.
Well, okay, just a young person.
Yeah, a young person, I guess. I worry about the processed foods that we're feeding our children from the ages of, like, newborn. You're eating formula now. We're learning about formula, how that's impacting our children. And then you go to school and you just stay in school. What I realized the other day that kids can be in school up to like 25 years old, eating toxic food and being put on pills. Like, everyone says you have ADHD. Like, everyone I know, every kid I know has ADHD and they're on a pill for it. But
being autistic is trending.
Oh my gosh, my friend came to me. She's a perfectly fine person. She's like, "Oh, social media told me I had autism." I was like, "What? Like, you're totally fine. Like, you're healthy. What are you talking about?" But I'm like, Beth, how do we reverse this toxic soup we've been putting my generation in? Like, how do we reverse that? Because we're trying to, but like, what do you think is the way we reverse it?
I think we have to do more working together in community, and finding people that are like-minded. I was just talking to this 18-year-old a couple of days ago, and he was telling me about the app, and I'm forgetting the name of it. It was the Yucca app. Is that what it's called? Where you can scan QR codes to see, and they rate the foods about like what's toxic and what's not. So this is what I mean again about like embracing technology, allowing for it to have some role. Because everybody that's like, under 30 is a digital native, and this is just sort of how they're moving through the world. But I think it is, fine. He was telling me basically, I use this app on all of my, I go to the store and I see what's out. This has seed oils in it. And I'm like, you're 18. How do you know about seed oils and that they're dangerous and stuff? So I just think we keep talking about it, keep sharing about it. And like I said before, the more we kind of own it as normal, like, you're not going to eat that and eat seed oil, are you? The more we do that, the easier it becomes. I think the more normalized being healthy becomes. And I think we can't hide and live our healthy lifestyle as if it's counterculture anymore. We have to act as if it's normal.
We do. We have to absolutely act as if it's normal. And I feel like, Penelope, you've been, ostracized, made fun of, bullied, all the things. But now you're stronger in yourself, so you can stand for it.
Yeah, like telling people that they're overweight or telling kids they're overweight is like a bad thing or a negative thing. But I mean, it's important to acknowledge the reality that, being overweight isn't good for our bodies. And the fact that definition was lost when I was 15 in school, and doctors and therapists and everyone was like, hey, it's fine to be fat. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like that's a bad word, but it's not.
Well, I think that one of the problems is that some of these health conditions have been tied up with identity. So like autism, that's a case, and obesity, that's a case too. So where people are rightly so, I think, trying to make sure everybody is included and embraced and acknowledged for who they are. We've gone into this kind of slippery slope where something like autism, which is believed to be something is genetic and lifelong, and it's part of your identity. That's kind of a misconception about what autism is. But because we're so interested in making sure everybody's feeling included, we're not acknowledging the frank medical issues that these individuals have with their autism. And like you just described, now we're talking about people who might very mildly have some symptoms associated with autism, getting that full diagnosis. But that is very different from like the 5-year-old who is a non-speaker and can't toilet on his own, and we've confused it. We've really muddied the water by getting autism tied up in identity politics. And I don't think that's helping anyone. I think what we need to do instead is just say, all right, let's put the labels aside. I don't care if you have autism or ADHD or what have you. Let's do a medical analysis and workup. Like, what does your microbiome look like? What does your toxicity in your body look like? We have so many advanced functional labs that you can do right now where you can assess your body's overall health. What's your oxidative stress look like? What's your vitamin and mineral status look like? Correct those things. And then a lot of those symptoms that end up becoming diagnoses, they go away.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that's how we shift this whole thing and start treating people as individuals medically.
It's very helpful if someone can have that done. I know myself, I've done that before, and many of those tests are not covered by insurance. And
Mhm.
so if you have the finances, I think it's an excellent way to get a marker. These are my mercury levels. This is my, got my microbiome, and then you really target lifestyle practices, supplementation, dietary, all the things, to really get on top of your health. It is very exciting, but it is only for the rich right now, from my perspective.
Yeah. I think
And
it's coming. I honestly think this is coming. I feel like I've talked to a number of people who are in insurance, and while the big insurance carriers are not doing it right now, there is this nascent, it's what I mean by technology. Things move so fast that there's this nascent movement to get those functional medicine labs tested, covered, and then to get things like nutritional supplements covered. There is a movement. It's coming. It isn't here today, so it's very frustrating. But I feel like the young people are coming in, the biohackers, the gym bros, they're all looking for this now, right? Not just because they want to overcome chronic illness. They just want to feel good and
they want the
optimize.
truth. They want the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I get the sense that they do not want to be BS'd anymore. And the veils are being lifted, and it's just like, what's the bottom line here?
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. And when I look at I was just doing my taxes yesterday, and I was looking at my medical expenses, and I'm like, wow, I spend so much that is not even considered a medical expense.
Mm-hmm.
All of the things like chiropractor, the acupuncture, the supplementation, the targeted, herbs and
The
whatnot.
tea, herbs,
Oh yeah, she's like tortured by my herbs.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm actually really interested in it now.
Yeah, but the smell.
Oh well,
The smell is bad. I know.
it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's worth it, right? Because you have more energy, good energy.
Yeah. Do you think, are your kids are adults now, you were saying?
I have they're 20, 18, and 15.
Okay. So are they rebelling against the health, or are they on board? If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, no, they come and go. I would say they used to be all on board. We did everything like as a family, and what I see happening is they've gone off as teenagers in particular. As soon as they get that license, it's like, oh, and money. As soon as they get their first job, then they can buy what they want. I just don't see it. And then what I'm seeing happening is they are starting to correlate how they feel with what they're doing and what they're eating. And they are sort of like, they heard what I said many years ago. They went away and tested and challenged. And now I see the older ones coming back now, having tested. My youngest one is just starting to test. So I see it's in that window, the teen years. That is normal. They're individuating. That's totally normal for teens. And I have total faith that they'll come back to the good teachings. And my favorite story around that is that story about Jordan Rubin. Do you guys know about how Jordan Rubin, who started that company, I forget what it's called. It's a supplement company, and something organics. And he basically was raised by a hippie mom, kind of like me, fermented her own sauerkraut kind of mom. And then super healthy, went off to college, drank booze and ate pizza, and basically developed Crohn's disease. So sick, got down to I think 90 pounds as a full grown man, was hospitalized, basically dying in the hospital. And so had to go out and experience it, had to hit that health bottom. And then he turned it around and then became this health and fitness guru and started this, huge hundreds of millions of dollars company trying to help other people regain their health and wellness. So I always think of that story of even the guy who was dying in the hospital still went back to his hippie mom and what she had taught him and came back to his roots. And that inspires me. And I hope that continues for my kids.
Yeah, me too. Penelope was the same story. So we have the same story. And I think that also things that we're close to as parents, our children are going to use to individuate. And that's also very normal.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, the health issue, and people have forgotten what it feels like to be healthy. They forgot what it felt like to have energy. They've forgotten what it's like to just, live normal, meaning waking up with the sun, going to bed with the sun, limiting screen time, and doing all the things that we've been talking about. as a new kind of normal. And it does take some discipline, and it does take some education that drives you. And hopefully this interview is something that the audience will be driven to take different action in their lives, because information alone is useless, right? The dedication to what people have learned is what's important. And that was what leads to the transformation. So you've written 2 books, is that right?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah,
So,
so talk to us about your books.
so I have a book called The Compromised Generation, and the subtitle of that is The Epidemic of Chronic Illness in America's Children. And that one basically looks at what I call the perfect storm of environmental factors that has contributed to the epidemic. So that's all the things we've been talking about: the antibiotics, the proton pump inhibitors, the toxins, the vaccines, the stress, like all of that is, part of that whole picture. But it also chronicles stories of people who have overcome their chronic health conditions, children. And then the second book is a book called Brain Under Attack. And that one is about Pans and Pandas, which is a not new, but in the last, I would say 15 years, emerging epidemic where children develop neuropsychiatric symptoms. So, when this was just coming out, people would say, oh, my child is suddenly crazy, like overnight, just slipping into sort of psychotic episodes, severe OCD, developmental regressions, not being able to sleep at night, having tics. So that's a syndrome known as PANS or PANDAS. And we wrote a book as a resource guide for parents about how to help these kids overcome these conditions. Because just like autism or just like ADHD or autoimmune diseases, this is a type of autoimmune syndrome, and it's completely reversible. So we wrote that book, Brain Under Attack, to help parents, like as a guide. It's like a step-by-step guide about how to help your child reverse that condition.
Amazing. And so what are some things that you want to be documenting to help reinstill hope in the near future, that you are probably accepting donations around and whatnot? I'm curious what you have on the radar.
Yeah, so we're trying to blow out our research program. So right now we have 2 research studies. One is called CHIRP. It stands for Child Health Inventory for Resilience and Prevention. And that's a study to collect data on how people are living in the modern world, and how, like, what their exposures are, what their experiences are, and how that correlates with health outcomes. And then we have another study I mentioned earlier, which is a longitudinal study assessing whether children can lose their diagnoses or improve their symptoms significantly by making all these changes we've been talking about. And then we have a number of other research studies that we're trying to get launched, including just publishing some of these case reports that I mentioned before, which is documenting the existence of these children who are getting better, making that part of the body of medical literature, making a compelling case that these conditions are reversible. That's really what we're focused on. We're a small nonprofit. We are, scrappy and really committed. What we care most about is that we change the narrative on this whole thing, that this idea that these conditions are lifelong goes away, because we know it's not true. And we know there's so much more we could do if we just shifted how we looked at these conditions and what kinds of therapeutic options that we present to parents as a standard of care. I mean, we would overcome this whole thing if the medical system just started training their physicians in nutrition and kind of root cause medicine, and we started reimbursing some of these things, we were talking about before. We could change this thing overnight. So I'm hopeful that we'll get there, but I think the more people are educated and the more people are asking for these things, and the more they leave conventional medicine, the more they leave pharmaceuticals, the market will shift. Even the pharmaceutical companies are like, ooh, I business develop and I need to get out of just patent medicine. And what else can I get into? Because it doesn't make business sense to keep pushing this business model if people are leaving it.
Right. I totally agree. Amazing, by the way. And if people want to donate to support your work, where can they go? We'll include it in the show notes, but just let us know here as well.
Yep, you can go to documentinghope.com. There's a big donate button right on the front of the website. So you can just click on that, click on it as many times as you want. Keep donating. But we are 100% donation driven. So we are private family foundations, individual donors, and that's how we get our research done.
Excellent. And I have a couple extra questions about, whether you think that it's the parents' responsibility, the government's responsibility, the school's responsibility, or you really think it's the kids that are going to end up saving themselves, in terms of this reversal that we're hoping to create.
Well, I think it's certainly, I think it is going to be the children and the siblings of the affected children who are going to make the biggest changes. Like I believe that's where the biggest changes will come. However, I think that every child who has a diagnosis or a set of symptoms is providing an opportunity, an invitation to their parents. Some parents will take it. Some parents have the capacity to take that invitation and some don't. But I really do think that this, this cohort of children that have come in the last 20 to 30 years have arrived to teach us that the way we're living is not compatible with human health and human life. And so again, they come in with these diagnoses, and that is like, it happened for me. I was like, my kids had symptoms. I was like, I could have taken one of two paths. I could have kept going down the conventional medical route. I work for pharmaceutical industry. That was my normal. I could have just kept going down that, and we would have struggled. We would have just struggled for the rest of our lives. But I didn't. I saw the invitation. They brought me the opportunity to see what was at the root, what was causing these symptoms. And I am grateful every single day that my kids came to me with those symptoms, because it's, saved my life, my kids' life. It's given them, us all, such a different, amazing, beautiful path that we followed alternatively. And I would not be here. I probably have a cancer diagnosis or an autoimmune diagnosis or something like that, had my children not come to me in the very early days and been like, Mom, this is not okay. I can't, I've got symptoms, help me. And I think that's how we should be viewing this. This is an invitation from our children to change things and to turn things around.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And if Penelope had taken the medication, she never would have gotten to the core of who she is. I mean, you've learned so much about yourself. We both have learned so much on this journey. It's almost like children are there as well, just to kind of reflect back to us everything that we haven't, processed, or our subconscious past can't see until they come and say, hey, this is not okay. But I agree with you. I think it really is these kids. But the kids, like the adults were speaking, but the kids actually had all the answers. And I'm like, why are we even up here? Like, you guys should be the ones running the show. You are a powerful generation of children. I would love to see gardens in schools. I'd love to see kids really learning about what nutrition choices are healthy. I mean, yes, we can take the ultra processed foods out of the cafeteria, but how is a kid going to choose? Because of color, because of taste? I mean, really, a child should know what to choose, and it's a parent's responsibility. But I think it's also, they should be learning about the cycle of life, and it's something that we just don't have for liability reasons. They don't garden in public schools, in private schools too, some of them. And it would just be, that would be a wonderful thing to see reinstilled in our school system. She was born in Switzerland. And so we got to witness a different life over there. I lived there for 10 years, and at the hospitals, they garden.
Wow.
They had huge gardens. All the lawns were basically vegetable gardens to fuel the the kitchen. And so it just seems so logical, doesn't it?
No, it totally seems logical. And if you think about how people treated sickness, even like infectious disease, about 75 years ago, 100 years ago, they'd take people outside and put them in the sun, or they'd bring them to the seashore where you're getting the salt air, which actually has antimicrobial properties. So like, they did these things that we look back and we're like, oh, wasn't that so primitive? No, actually they were doing things that were helpful to your health. We've become so, mechanized and reductionist in everything we do, that we've lost the bigger picture. We've lost the connection with nature. I think that's actually a big part of this whole epidemic is it's teaching us how much we've lost connection with nature, and that the more we're in sync with nature, the healthier we are.
I completely agree. Beth, is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners with as we come to a close? Any words of wisdom, or just anything that's on your heart or mind that you haven't shared yet that just needs to be said?
Yeah, one of the things I said earlier was that it's so important to do this healing with friends or family or community. But if you feel like you don't have that, like if you feel, lots of parents feel like this, like they feel like they're on an island and nobody thinks the way I do, and I'm all alone. We actually created an online community for parents to connect with other parents who are going through the healing journey with their kids. It's called Healing Together, because that's what we're doing. And we meet a couple times a month via Zoom, and we have integrative physicians and health coaches who are there for question and answer. And we have a whole kind of step-by-step platform that we walk parents through to teach them on how do you make the diet changes? How do you change your lifestyle? How do you change the things in your home? And again, we created that because it is so lonely if you think that you're doing things different from the rest of your society or your culture. So we want everybody to know you are not alone, and you can find a community in Healing Together, which is available via the Documenting Hope website. So you can check us out there, and we're here to help.
That's amazing. I love that you're doing that. I want to join.
You can join.
I'm gonna join.
Welcome.
Yeah, that would be I know, I think it's really important that we support each other. It's true. There's like this relaxation and then this openness, and it's like, oh, it's not so hard. I'm not alone. I just think we're wired for that. It just makes sense.
Yeah, and I love our community. Like we have these live Zoom calls where these moms come on and they share their tips and resources. Not we don't have all the answers. We've been helping these families for 15 years, but we don't have all the answers. Then you have a mom that comes in and is like, "Oh, have you tried this? Have you tried this?" And that learning together is so important. And the sharing and the vulnerability, the willingness to be vulnerable and be like, I'm struggling here. I need help. That is so powerful when you do that in community.
And I'd just love to hear your vision. For example, like let's say it was all done, right? All the work was done. Like what would it look like?
I think there would be a reconnection with the ways we've done things traditionally, and an embracing of ancestral ways, and an embracing of sort of the ceremonial pieces of the way people used to live, and the rhythms of the way people used to live. Like that would feel more natural. And when people have their children, they would do what people used to do hundreds of years ago. You would have a midwife and a community of women surrounding you, and this sort of lovingly bring children into this world, and then nurturing them as a community going forward. And that has really disappeared because we've medicalized everything. Like people have birth in hospitals and everything is beepers and sensors and pharmaceuticals. Like I really do think that my vision is that we just reconnect to those old rhythms. And that doesn't mean we need to do things that the way things were done in the 1800s. Like we've learned some things about hygiene and some other important things. But I do think that we can still live in a modern way in sync with nature. And so that is my vision, is that we as human beings respect, honor, and cherish what it means to be a human. And that is in sync with and in rhythm with nature. And I really hope we're heading closer to that as time goes on.
Oh, so beautiful. From your mouth and this channel to God's ears, that is our hope. And with that, we're going to end this podcast today. And we're just so grateful that everyone listening listened. And we're hopeful that this made a difference in your life, and that you share this podcast with somebody who is ready to hear this information, that you also like it. And please do comment down below. We welcome all of your questions. We will put the links on how you contact Beth in the show notes, as well as more information about her. And we are just so grateful to have this time together. And we will see you all the time.